In this lecture segment, we are talking about the training of artists in the early modern period. We'll focus on 4 paintings by female artists in the 17th and 18th centuries. We're talking about paths people took to become artists. The training of artists in the Renaissance and Baroque occurred within workshops that were governed by local guilds. Painters belonged to the same guild as pharmacists, as both professions ground up natural materials as part of their practice. Painters prepared pigments by grinding them. Children were apprenticed to masters and would learn the craft of art over a period of years, starting with menial tasks and eventually assisting in creating art and making their own works, and rising through the levels of guild membership. Art was a craft or a trade and was not really a profession commonly open to women. They could not train for years in masters' workshops as apprentices because it was not an environment in which they were welcome and safe. They had more of a chance to become artists if their fathers were artists. And in these 2 prints showing us workshops from the early modern period, we see that the people doing the work are men. Women here are objects. Here's a woman having her portrait painted, accompanied by her chaperone. Women are the ones being depicted, not the ones doing the depicting. Artemisia Gentileschi, an Italian Baroque artist, was the daughter of a painter, and she trained in his workshop in Rome. She was not allowed to make sketches in life drawing classes because of her gender, so her work emphasizes depictions of female bodies, which she did not necessarily need classes to learn about. In her father's studio, she faced significant opposition and trauma that affected her career. Her father had her married off to an artist in Florence. Her self-portrait from 1638 shows her in the act of painting, but also as a personification of painting as a liberal art. She embodies painting. We see the tools of her trade, fine clothing, as she creates a work that shows her skill as an artist and her intellectual knowledge. She established herself as a painter of biblical heroines, a popular subject, likely especially for women viewers in the Counter-Reformation period. Unusually, these are history paintings, which was the most prestigious genre of art. Women more commonly painted portraits. In this work, she depicts Judith, who saved her people from the Assyrians by seducing and killing their general, Holofernes. She's learned her Caravaggio lessons, see the tenebrism, and her lessons from Venetian art, with the vivid color and naturalistic texture, to create a work of art that shows a woman as a victor. Dutch Baroque painter Judith Leister takes a different route to become an artist and joins her local painting guild and takes students herself. The social liberality of the Dutch Republic made this possible for her, as her gender would have precluded guild membership in other countries. Unlike Gentileschi, she did not have a painter for her father, and we don't know how she received training. This self-portrait shows her in her finery, painting the type of genre scene she made and sold. It's a work of art showing what she was capable of as an artist. Lively portraits capturing the personality of the sitter and genre images of everyday life that are entertaining and engaging. And her clothing shows her success in this profession. Think of this painting as a job interview. She's wearing her suit, showing her resume, and making her confidence and ability clear. Dutch artists sold on the open market, and Leister carved out a market niche for her work, even as she also took male students and trained them, a very unusual practice for a woman artist. Our third path to becoming an artist is through art academies. The rise of academies solved some impasses for women artists and created new ones. In 1648, the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture was founded in Paris to teach and train artists. This was not the type of environment for learning art that we think about today, a place to experiment, to fuel self-expression. No, this was instead a place where artists were trained to work in a particular style. Training at the academy was rooted in the classical aesthetic, and especially in figure drawing. After admittance, students spent years drawing from plaster casts of sculpture, and after mastering that, they were allowed to draw from life, from nudes. In this scene of the Royal Academy in London, we see members of the academy in a staged figure drawing class, and only after entirely mastering drawing were they allowed to put paint to canvas by studying with master painters. Regulations were put in place that ensured only academically trained artists could receive commissions from the government, be court painters, or teach at the French Academy. To even get into the academy, a prospective student had to have recommendations from the academy's masters. Imagine trying to get into KU by getting professors you do not know to write recommendations for you. Students at the academy wanted to win the Prix de Rome, a scholarship that allowed them to travel from Paris to Rome to study for 5 years. Art was shown publicly only at the annual Salon, a public exhibition that you see here of art at the Louvre in Paris, and the same folks who controlled the Academy controlled the Salon, so artists did not have a chance to exhibit unless they played by the rules and pleased the Academy, and they had a better chance of getting into the Academy if they created certain types of art. In France at the Academy there was a hierarchy of genres. At the top of the list with the most prestige and status was history painting, which are depictions of religious, mythological, allegorical, historical, and literary subjects, followed by portraiture, genre, landscape, and still life. The more perceived intellectual content a work of art required, the more status it held. So still life, according to this philosophy, replicated nature and required less intellectual processing than a depiction of a story from the Bible. The system tightly controlled the type of art made, which had to suit a very specific classical aesthetic. The system also controlled the artists and where they could work, and controlled where and what art was exhibited. The concept of creating an academy to train artists helped to address some of the issues artists like Dürer had with the status of artists. Academies attempted to make the process of art making into something that was seen as being intellectual instead of mechanical. It was a true act of creation informed by training and education made by a gentleman, not a craftsman who gets his hands dirty. Academies began in Florence, Rome, and eventually in London and Philadelphia. Regulations at the French Academy limited the number of women artists who could be admitted to just 4 per year, but even if they got in, aspects of academic training were completely closed to them by virtue of their gender. They could not draw from the nude or dissect cadavers to learn anatomy. Even in this view of the Royal Academy in London, the 2 women in the Academy are shown in portraits on the wall, instead of being shown in the live drawing class. Adelaide Labille-Guiard was one of the women painters who did receive acceptance to the French Academy. She had no artists in her family, but her neighbor was a miniaturist, a painter of mini portraits like the teeny self-portrait on ivory that you see here, and she was apprenticed to him. She joins the Painters Guild in Paris, but the government shuts down the guild, so she learns how to paint in oil so she can apply to the French Academy, and her oil painting teacher recruits friends of his in the Royal Academy to order portraits from her to help her get in, and she does. She's admitted to the Academy in 1783 and exhibits her work at the annual salons. She specializes in portraiture. This combined self-portrait and group portrait makes a statement about how she perceived the world of art making. She shows this self-portrait at the 1785 Salon. In the portrait, we see the artist in a self-portrait at work in front of the canvas. She's holding her palette with other tools essential to her painting. She shows herself at work, as did Velázquez, Rembrandt, Gentileschi, and Leicester, trying to show herself as a creator, as a professional. But she's not wearing clothes she would be sporting if she was painting. She's fancy. She wears silk and a straw hat, showing off her ability to paint silk satin of very complex texture. She even shows the reflection of her dress in the floor below. And this statement of status economically and as a creator is magnified by her inclusion of 2 of her female students. In 1780, even before she joined the Academy, she started teaching female pupils. So she's not just showing us her success, but theirs as well. As she created the painting, so she created them. She presents herself not just as a talented painter, but also as an effective teacher who makes artists in her own image. They look like triplets. Labille-Guiard makes an effective visual supporting the abilities of women artists and advocating for their place in the academic system as students and eventually as teachers like her. In 1790, Labille-Guiard stood up in front of the Academy and argued passionately for lifting the cap on women artists who were allowed entrance to the Academy each year. Her petition was denied, and women were actually barred from entrance to the Academy until the late 19th century. But Labille-Guiard's mentorship of other aspiring women artists and membership in the Academy helped to pave the way for the increasing numbers of women artists who would enter the profession through alternative paths in the 19th century.